Hey guys, Heathway here, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to bring you guys my predictions for the 2019/20 Premier League season. This is of course going to be a controversial video. I'm sure a lot of you guys will share differing opinions to my own, and that's normal, and that's one of the best things about these videos, because you guys can let me know your predictions for the Premier League. I want to hear them. Let me know down below all of the things you disagree with this video. There's probably going to be a lot of them. Let me know down below. Now I'm going to be basing my predictions off of three main factors. The first of which is the quality and depth of the squad that each team has. I'm also going to be taking into account just how well they performed last season, because obviously that offers a decent reflection of how you can expect them to perform in the coming season. And then finally, I'm also going to be looking at the transfer window. Were the teams able to strengthen their sides and bring in better players, or did they perhaps even lose some of their better players, and are they going into the new season with a worse squad compared to what they had last year? Now, all of those things will be taken into account, but one thing I can't account for is the random nature of football. I'm not going to be able to see the future and predict whether or not a key player for a big team is going to get injured. You never know. Mohamed Salah, Aguero, Harry Kane, one of those players could break a leg and be out for the whole season. You really never know. And I also obviously can't predict the players that teams are possibly going to sign in the winter transfer window either. There's loads of random things that could happen, but looking at the three factors that I've been talking about, that's what we're going to be trying to base all of these predictions on. I'm not going to be biased, and I'm going to try my best to get as many of these accurately predicted. It's going to be a long video because I want to go in depth and kind of analyse each team on how I expect them to perform. So hope you guys do enjoy, and without further ado, let's go on into it. So starting off in 20th place, there always has to be a team that finishes last. I've got Sheffield United. I've got nothing against them. I've got nothing against any of the teams in this video, but just looking at the quality of the players they have in their squad, I don't think it's up to the standard of many of the other teams around them, and they lack Premier League experience. It's been a few years since they last played in the Premier League, and very few of their players have played in the league before, so it's going to be a new experience, a learning curve, and they may not necessarily finish last, but I think they will finish in the relegation zone, simply because they don't have as good a squad as many of the teams around them, similar to Cardiff last season, and they also haven't strengthened massively. They have made a few signings, but they haven't really brought in many Premier League quality players. They have got Phil Jagielka, but he is very, very old now. They've got Ravel Morrison, who is a very hit or miss player. They've got Ollie McBurney as well, but he is a championship player. I don't think they've strengthened enough in order to stay up. Now in 19th, I've gone with another newly promoted side, and that is Norwich City. And I think it's the same kind of case as Sheffield United. They haven't strengthened sufficiently, and the quality of their squad isn't up to the standard of many of the other teams around them that will be involved in that relegation battle. Typically, you've got about 5 or 6 teams that are all down there and all battling until the end of the season. And if you look at the players they have, yes, they've got Pukki, who is a good goal scorer, but they don't have many proven Premier League players, and they haven't brought any of them in. They've got Farman, who is a good keeper on loan. They've also brought in Kevin Dermich on a free, and they've got Patrick Roberts on loan, but they haven't strengthened with Premier League proven players, and that's what you need. You need experience, especially when it's a side that's not been in the league for a couple of years. They lack Premier League experience. They lack players of proven Premier League pedigree, and I think that's going to be their downfall. They just didn't spend enough, and the squad already wasn't good enough, I don't think, to stay up. Again, they may not be 19th, but I think they are going to be in the relegation zone. Finishing off the relegation zone in 18th, I've gone with the Newcastle United, and it pains me to say it because they are a very big club, and their relegation would be a loss to the Premier League. But I just think with Steve Bruce, and with the fact they've lost Rondon and Jose Perez, who scored the majority of their goals last season, I don't see them staying up. I think the reason they stayed up last season and in previous years was purely down to Rafa Benitez, because he was one of the best managers in the league, and he really managed to get the best out of a fairly average squad and got them performing, made them quite hard to beat, and he's the person that kept them up. And Steve Bruce, he's at the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to managers. He constantly seems to fail. He gets relegated pretty much with every Premier League side he takes over. We saw at Aston Villa, they were very average under him. They brought in a new manager, they got promoted. He just doesn't get the best out of teams and the players at his disposal, and he's not going to get backed by Mike Ashley because he just doesn't back managers, whoever they are. He didn't back Benitez. I don't think he's going to back Bruce. They brought in Andy Carroll, which isn't really an ample replacement for Rondon and Perez. He's also very injury prone and getting on a bit. They've made a few other signings. They were able to keep hold of some of their star players like Lascelles and Longstaff, but I think overall, because of the management, they're not going to be able to replace Benitez. They're not going to be able to replace those goals from the forwards they've lost, and for that reason I see them going down. Just narrowly avoiding the drop in 17th place, I've got Brighton, a side who've made some decent signings like Trossard and Neil Maupay, who will strengthen their side and already have a few decent players like Matt Ryan, Lewis Dunk, Jose Izquierdo, Glenn Murray, just to name a few. I think the issue with them is the fact they've lost their manager, who was, I'd say, amongst the most underrated and consistent managers in the league. Chris Hughton always managed to get the best out of his players and made them very hard to beat. They were very solid defensively. And having lost him, they've got, I think, a manager who pretty much everyone would agree isn't up to the standard that he set. And they've also got quite an old squad. Glenn Murray was their main goal scorer. He got, I believe, 13 or 14 goals in the league last season, and he really is getting on now. I think he's in his mid-30s. I don't think he's going to be able to score nearly as many goals. They've also lost Anthony Knockaert, who, although he didn't have the best of seasons last year, was amongst their better players. He was their player of the year when they got promoted to the Premier League, but he's now gone on loan to Fulham, which I think is a bit of a weird transfer. Not entirely sure why. But yeah, I think they're just about going to avoid the drop, but it's hard to say. Any one of the bottom kind of 6 or 7, I think, could easily get into the relegation zone, but for me, I've put Brighton in 17. Now in 16th, I've gone with Aston Villa, a side who I think could be very hit or miss next season. I could easily see them finishing 12th or maybe even 11th, but I could also see them getting relegated because they signed a lot of players. They spent over £100 million, and we saw what happened with Fulham last year. They spent in excess of £150 million on some very good players like Seri. They got Schürrle as well, Le Marchand, a lot of quality players, but they just didn't gel as a squad and they got relegated pretty early on. And the same could happen for Aston Villa. They have got some good players. They got Douglas Luiz from Manchester City, Wesley from Bruges. They got Trezeguet as well. They got a load of players. Like, honestly, they've signed like 15 players. It's crazy. The list is very, very long if you look on Sky Sports. And it's just going to be interesting to see how those players gel and if they play well as a squad. I think if they do, then you're going to see them move up in the table. It could be like Wolves even last season. But I'm not entirely sure. It's going to be interesting to see where they finish. I've kind of put them in the middle, not putting them in the relegation zone, not putting them any higher up. I think anywhere kind of from 17th to kind of 14th or 13th is where I'd expect them to finish. They've spent a lot of money. They have upgraded their side. They already have a few decent players like Jack Grealish, for example, Neil McGinn as well, who recently signed a new contract. So they're going to be interesting. I'm not sure. Next up in 15th, I've gone with Southampton, who always consistently seem to be in the bottom 3. They always kind of just narrowly escape relegation, and I think they're probably going to do the same this year. They signed Danny Ings on a permanent deal from Liverpool, and he was one of their main goal scorers last year. They've got Shane Long, who got into a decent run of form at the end of the season. Defensively, they're normally quite solid. They've managed to keep hold of the likes of Lamina and a couple of their other better players. And I think they're just going to be here or there, fairly consistent. They're not going to shock the world and finish in the top 10. I don't think they're going to get relegated. I think they're going to probably end up finishing around about 17th to maybe 14th or 13th. Kind of like Aston Villa, but they haven't really signed anyone, I don't think, apart from Danny Ings, who they got permanently, and maybe 1 or 2 other smaller players. So I think about 15th is a decent call for them. Now in 14th, I've gone with Crystal Palace, who were actually very, very good last season. In fact, if you counted games purely from Christmas onwards, they finished 3rd behind Liverpool and Manchester City. But that was because they had a goal scorer. They brought in Michy Batshuayi, and he really improved them. But he was only on loan. They've lost him. They haven't replaced him with a goal scorer. Zaha really doesn't look like his head's in the game. He handed in a transfer request. As of the moment I'm recording this video, he is still at the club, but he's refused to train with them today. And they also lost Wan-Bissaka. They didn't go out and spend any money on any big players. I believe they brought in James McCarthy from Everton, but I don't think they spent much of the money they got from Wan-Bissaka. I think they brought in a couple of smaller players. I think they got Gary Cahill maybe on a free. They got a few decent players, but they haven't really strengthened massively, and they haven't brought in that goal scorer. And I think because they're a team that is so focused around Zaha, he is their main player. I think if he doesn't perform to the standard he did last season, and I don't think he will because I don't think his head's in the game at all, I don't see them doing particularly well. I also think Zaha will probably end up leaving at Christmas, and they may have a really good start to the season because Zaha is going to play really well to try and force a move and to kind of increase his stock. But I think he is likely to leave, and when he does leave, I think going forwards they're just not really going to have anything. Yeah, they've got Andros Townsend, they've got Milivojevic, a couple of other players, but I think defensively they're decent, but going forwards they really lack any kind of goal scorer. So for me, I don't see them finishing any higher than kind of like 14th, 13th. I think they're going to be like Southampton or Aston Villa, one of those sides that is going to be just above the relegation zone, maybe like at the end of the season, maybe about 10 points above. They're not going to be in huge danger of getting relegated, but equally they're not really going to be pushing for the top half of the table. Next up in 13th, I've gone with Burnley, a fairly uninspiring side. They don't exactly set the football world on fire, but they do what they do very, very well. They're an extremely tough team to break down. They sit back, defend very, very well in numbers, and hit teams on the break. And they've managed to keep hold of a lot of their key defenders. They've still got Ben Mee and Tarkowski, who several top teams were interested in. They've kept their fullbacks as well. They did lose Heaton, but they've got Pope. They've also got Joe Hart. They signed Danny Drinkwater on loan from Chelsea, which is a good signing on deadline day. And they've got the likes of Goodmanson. They've got a couple of other players going forwards, the likes of Chris Wood, for example. And I think they're just going to be a side that is... It's going to be hard to break down, that's going to score the occasional goal. We'll see a few upsets, maybe against some top sides that just can't break through them. You typically see that. I think they beat Chelsea last year. They almost beat City. They're quite a tough team to break down. So I can see them finishing, again, similar to a lot of the teams I've just mentioned, anywhere really from like 16th or 17th up to maybe 13th or 12th. I've put them a little bit higher up there just because they haven't really lost any key players and they have made some good signings. And I think compared to the likes of Southampton and Crystal Palace, I just see more potential with them to finish a little bit higher up. But genuinely, like, you could interchange the majority of the teams I've shown you here and it wouldn't really be that surprising. So these teams here, the bottom few are the harder ones to predict. But moving on into the top 12, I think you're going to see some more kind of solid and concrete predictions that I think I can agree with more. These ones here, very, very hit or miss. And constantly as I was looking at these and predicting these, I was changing my mind and I found it much, much harder to predict than the top half of the table. So next up in 12th, I've gone with Bournemouth, a side that I think pretty much everyone likes. They have a very small budget, they do things very well, they've got some good players, they play good football, they've got a great manager and a lot of attacking potential with the likes of Wilson, King, Brooks, who is unfortunately injured for a couple of months I believe. They've got Fraser as well, Jefferson Lerma. They've got a decent defence with the likes of Ake. They've got Daniels. They've signed Rico, I believe, as well. They've got a couple of decent players in there. They've just got a decent side all round. They've got some good players going forwards. They score quite a few goals. Their defence is solid too. And they're a side that I think could finish in the top half. Anywhere from 12th to maybe 10th or 9th. They're a side that's going to be here or there. I don't think they're in any danger of getting drawn into a relegation battle. I also don't think they're going to be pushing for the Europa League. But mid-table, I think, will be a good finish for them. And if they make some good signings in January, you could maybe see them push as high as 9th or even 8th. Next up is Watford, a very exciting team to watch last season. They finished, I believe, was it 8th? Maybe 9th. They were just behind Wolves. They managed to get to the FA Cup final. And they play good attacking football. They're an entertaining side to watch. They've got a great manager in Javi Gracia. And they've managed to keep hold of the majority of their good players. They've still got Deulofeu. They've got Doucouré. I think a lot of teams were interested in him, but they've still managed to keep hold of him. Defensively, they're pretty solid. And then going forwards, they've got some good talent. So I don't really see them really pushing up as much as they did last season. I think Troy Deeney, as he's getting on a bit in age, isn't going to be able to score nearly as many goals. They have brought in Danny Welbeck on a free, so he'll probably fill in those boots there. I think they're going to be a mid-table side, maybe down to 13th, maybe as high as 9th or 8th. They're going to have a decent season. Now in 10th, bang on in mid-table, I've got Wolves. It's going to be interesting to see how them and the following 2 or 3 teams play next season. And I think any one of them could potentially break into the top 6. It's possible. Wolves could be one of those sides, but I think because they've got the Europa League to contend with, it's going to be tricky for them to balance the players they've got. They're going to have to rotate a lot of them. They have made some good signings. Crotone, for example, from AC Milan. I believe he only scored 4 goals last season, which isn't amazing for a striker, but he's young, he's got talent and potential. They've got a great manager as well who really will be able to get the best out of players like him. They've got Raul Jimenez, they've got Diego Jota as well. They've got such a good side all round. Similar to a team like Bournemouth, they don't really have any bad players. They just have an all-round solid squad with a lot of quality in a lot of positions. They've got a great goalkeeper in Rui Patricio, an international player. Same in the midfield with the likes of Moutinho and Neves. All round just a really, really good squad. So I could see them getting a little bit higher, maybe up to even like 6th, maybe 7th, maybe down to like 12th or 11th. Typically you see these sides, like we saw Burnley, the sides that aren't really in the top 6, when they get into the Europa League, they typically end up having a worse season than they did before. Burnley, they had a really good season one year, got into the Europa League, and then they were down like near the relegation zone the following season, just because it's hard to balance the travelling to those games in the Europa League, especially in the early stages, often way off in Eastern Europe and quite far away. It's hard to balance that and rotating the whole squad, which then has an impact on the league. And I think they are going to focus a bit of effort on the Europa League because they've got a good squad. They could progress maybe to like the quarterfinals or semi-finals, or you never know, even go further. So because of that, I think their league form's going to suffer a bit. But I don't think they're in any danger of getting drawn into a relegation battle or anything. Such a good side. I think you're definitely going to see them around mid-table or anywhere up to maybe at most 6. Next up in 9th, I've gone with Leicester. They sold Harry Maguire, and that is a big loss because he was one of their key players, but they got £80 million for him. Now, they haven't really reinvested that back into the squad. They have been linked with a lot of defenders, but they weren't able to get any of them across the line. They wanted to get Lewis Dunk, they wanted to get Tarkowski, but they didn't replace Maguire. They've still got Johnny Evans, they've got a few decent players defensively. They've got Jamie Vardy, who is a very, very good goal scorer, but he's getting on now. I believe he's 32 or 33, so I'm not sure if he's going to have quite as good a season as he did last year. I think he got 16 or 17 goals, which is very, very good last season. I don't think he'll be able to repeat that. Overall, they've got a solid squad, very similar to the likes of Wolves, Watford and Bournemouth. They could potentially push a little bit further up, maybe 7th, maybe 6th. They've got Tielemans as well. They've got a really good all-round team. Their midfield, especially, is brilliant. But also, they could maybe drop down to like 11th or 12th. Another mid-table kind of side. I think it's going to be interesting to see how them, Wolves, and the 2 next teams I'm going to talk about, it's going to be interesting to see how they do, because I think 1 or 2 of them could possibly break into the top 6. Next up in 8th, I've gone with West Ham, and they've had a really good transfer window. They've brought in some quality players. They did lose Arnautovic, but they replaced him with Haller, who I think could do even better. He's a proven goal scorer from the Bundesliga. They've got Pablo Fornals as well. Yarmolenko is back from injury. They've got Felipe Anderson. I think outside of the typical kind of top 6, they've got by far and away one of the best strike forces in the league. They've got a solid defence and a good midfield as well. All round, just a really good side. They've got good players in pretty much every single position. It's hard to predict where them, Leicester, Wolves and Everton are going to finish, and I was struggling to rank them. I didn't know who'd finish above who, but in the end I put West Ham as my 8th place team. They're another side, like the ones I've just been talking about, who could possibly break the top 6 mould, and they could finish as low as like 13th or 12th. I'm not sure, but I've put them in 8th. Next up, controversially in 7th place, I've gone with Chelsea. Now hold on before you start abusing me, probably racially, because Chelsea fans. I think Chelsea will do well in the years to come under Frank Lampard, but next season I think is going to be a bit of a development year for him as a manager and for the players under him. He can't sign anyone, so there's going to be a lot of younger players coming through. I think they're going to promote a lot of younger talent, and there's a lot of players who've previously kind of been on the edge and on the fringe of the plans of the manager at Chelsea. People like Loftus-Cheek, Barkley and Kurt Zouma, just to name a few. I think it's going to be interesting to see if they can step up and get into the first team and prove themselves. There's Christensen as well, there's Pulisic, there's a lot of young players, and they could potentially do a lot better than 7th. They could maybe get 4th, 5th, maybe even 3rd. I'm not sure. It's going to be interesting because they have a lot of young players, so you never really know. There's people like Mason Mount as well, low-knee players who've been brought back to the club. They're having to make do with what they've got because they can't sign anyone. And they've obviously got some brilliant players like Kante and a few others in the side. But I think the main thing is the fact they've lost Eden Hazard. They've lost him, and he was their talisman. He was probably the best player in the Premier League, at least for a couple of the seasons he was there. He was brilliant, and he really carried them. He carried them to the Europa League final, which they won last year, and he's the reason they're in the Champions League. And I think balancing the Champions League with their commitments in the league and domestically in the Cups as well, with the players they've got, I don't think they're going to be able to keep it all on one plate, and I think they're going to finish maybe like 6th or 7th. I don't think they're going to get into the Champions League, and I don't think they're going to do particularly well this season, but I think in the future when Lampard can sign people, he'll be able to strengthen the side, bring in players that suit his philosophy, and they will do well. But I think next season it's going to be more of a development year for him as a manager, given he's fairly inexperienced. He's only had one season at the top, and that was with Derby, who he took from 6th to 6th. He improved the way they played, but he didn't manage to take them into the Premier League or anything like that. So I think they're going to finish 7th. That's what I'm thinking. But please don't abuse me. Another controversial opinion, in 6th place, I've gone with Everton. I wanted to not just be the same as everyone else and not just pick the typical top 6. I want a team like Leicester, Wolves, Watford, maybe even Bournemouth, West Ham, Everton. I want one of them to break into the top 6 and break that mould that we've had for years and years and years and years. And Everton have made some very, very good signings, and they have a very good squad now. They've got Pickford, the England #1. They've got Coleman at right back with Sidibe as backup. On the left, they've got Digne, one of the best left backs in the league, with Baines as backup. They've got a decent back line as well in terms of centre backs. In the midfield, they've got Andre Gomes permanently. They did lose Idrissa Gana Gueye, but they brought in, I believe he's called Graban, a player from the Bundesliga. Up front, they've got Moise Kean. They've got Richarlison. In the midfield, they've got Sigurdsson as well. They've got Tosin as backup. They've got so many options. They have really good squad depth. And all round, just a really good side. I see Everton potentially pushing into the top 6. And it will be really cool to see that happen, because we've had that kind of set in stone top 6 of Chelsea, Spurs, Liverpool, Arsenal, United and City for a very long time now. It's going to be interesting to see how Keane does. I think if he has a good season and gets maybe 15 or 16 goals, they will get into the top 6. If he doesn't, and if Tosin doesn't step up to get that similar kind of amount of goals, I don't think they will. So it's going to be interesting to see how Keane and also Richarlison play. If they score a lot of goals, I think they will do well, because they've got a solid defence and a good midfield. It's just going to be interesting to see how many goals they score. And I've said interesting a lot, but hopefully I want Everton to get into the top 6. Well, not necessarily Everton. West Ham, Leicester, Wolves. I want one of those less established teams to break the mould. It would be good to see. Next up in 5th place, I've gone with Man United. Quite a difficult team to predict. I don't see them getting into the top 4, but they could possibly get 4th. I also don't really see them having an awful season and finishing like 10th or 9th, which a few people are predicting. I think they're going to be anywhere from 4th down to maybe like 7th or 8th. It was tough to choose between Chelsea, United and Everton. I wanted to put one of those lesser established sides into the top 6, so I've got Everton there, but United could easily finish kind of like 6th or 7th, I think. The issue with them is, although they have a really nice team and they've strengthened what their weak point was last year, which was the defence, they've got Harry Maguire, a big upgrade defensively. Him and Lindelof could be a good partnership. You've got on the left-hand side Luke Shaw, a good left-back, and then Wan-Bissaka, a very promising young talent who is very good defensively and also going forwards. They've got a really good defence now, and obviously David De Gea, one of the best keepers in the world. Going forwards, they've lost Lukaku, they've brought in James, and they've got Paul Pogba as well. They've managed to retain him, but Pogba, I don't think his head is going to be in the game. I don't think his mentality is going to be there, because he's openly said he wants to move on for a new challenge. And Pogba's the type of player that when he's on his game and when he's playing well, he's the best player on the pitch. He's brilliant, he's one of the best players in the world when he's on his day. But if his head isn't in the game, he's just like a shadow of his potential self. He gives the ball away all the time. He just smashes the ball out of play pointlessly. He tries skills that just don't work. So it's going to be interesting. Like, he can carry the team if he wants, and if he plays well, he will carry them, and they'll do very well. But if he doesn't, then I think a lot depends on him. And he could also go in January. If he gets injured, I think they're completely screwed. If Rashford gets injured, I also think they're screwed, because having got rid of Lukaku, everything is resting on Rashford's shoulders as the main goal scorer. Yes, they've got Martial, but he typically plays on the wing. And they've got James, they've got Sanchez. If Sanchez has a good season, he could step in to fill the role of Pogba as the main player for United. You never know. He is a very good player. He's shown it in the past at Arsenal, but at United he really has been a shadow of his former self. I think if Rashford or Pogba gets injured, they're kind of screwed. But if they stay fit, and if Pogba and maybe if Sanchez have good seasons, they could get into the top 4. But I've put them as 5th. They're hard to predict. You never really know. But the whole system at United is kind of messed up with the Glazers, with Ed Woodward, with how he backs the manager. Just everything. It's a little bit weird. And I've got a lot of friends who support United, and they agree with me. I think I think kind of 5th is a decent place. They could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but I've put them in 5th. Now in 4th place, I've gone with Arsenal, who I think have had a really, really good window. They've brought in some quality players all round, and they've really improved their squad. Going forwards, I think they've got one of the best front lines in the Premier League with Aubameyang, Lacazette and Nicolas Pepe. It's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to the league, having had such a good season last year, being the 2nd top scorer in the Ligue 1 and carrying Lille from being a relegation threatened side to finishing in the Champions League places. He really did carry them single-handedly. He was brilliant. So it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts. They've obviously got Ozil as well, who they managed to keep hold of. There were rumours of him potentially going to the MLS. They've got Torreira as well. They've got an all-round very solid side. And defensively they've improved too, signing Kieran Tierney in the left-back position. And I believe David Luiz. Now, I just had to go onto Twitter to check this because I know that he was having a medical at Arsenal and they've not officially announced him yet. But there's pictures leaked of him in an Arsenal kit and stuff, so I believe they've signed David Luiz. And defensively, they're all over the place. They were last year with Mustafi, Koscielny, Bellerin, Lichtsteiner. It was just not very good. They've lost Koscielny. Mustafi, he's disabled, but he's probably now not really going to be playing for them, so that issue's been resolved. Sokratis and David Luiz isn't a bad centre-back partnership. With Leno in behind, Tierney and Bellerin on each side, that's a solid defence, and then going forwards they've got so much potential to score a lot of goals. So I think 4th place would be good for Arsenal. I think they could possibly finish a little bit higher, maybe 3rd, and maybe a little bit lower, down to like 5th or 6th, but I think they're going to be here or there around 4th place. Now in 3rd place, I've gone with Tottenham. I was debating whether or not to put them 2nd or 3rd. In the end, I've settled with 3rd place, but I think if they were to have signed Lo Celso or Dybala, they could have really pushed for the title. But I think with the players they've got, 3rd place would be good. I think Ndombele is a great signing. He's strengthened the midfield. He's an upgrade to the likes of Dyer and Wanyama, who were previously in that role. They've also signed Ryan Sessegnon. I'm not sure whether he's going to play more as a winger or a fullback. Probably as a fullback, because that's their lacking position. Last season, their worst players were their fullbacks, and I think he's probably going to step in instead of Davies and Rose on the left-hand side. However, they did lose Trippier. He was one of their worst players last season. I know a lot of Tottenham fans who hated him. But having lost him and then suffered an injury with Aurier, they're going to have Kyle Walker-Peters as the starting right-back. They've got brilliant centre-backs in Vertonghen, Alderweireld and Davinson Sanchez, a good keeper in Lloris, a great front line with the likes of Lucas, Harry Kane of course, and Heung-min Son. I think all round they've got a very, very solid squad and they're going to be one of the main sides pushing for the title. But I don't think they're going to quite get there, so for me, 3rd place is a good finish for them. So in 2nd place, you knew it was going to be between one of two teams. I've gone with Liverpool. The reason for this is because they've got obviously a great squad with so many great players like Salah, Mane, Firmino and Van Dijk and Alisson and many more, but they haven't improved upon what they did last season. They've brought in a couple of players, but they've all been kind of fringe youth players who aren't going to improve their starting 11 immediately, whereas City have. They've strengthened, they've improved upon what they already had. And what we saw 2 seasons ago, City finished 25 points ahead of Liverpool. Liverpool went out and spent a lot of money, over 150 million, and they managed to close that gap to finish just behind City. But now City have opened that gap again by improving their squad with first team players, and that's something Liverpool haven't done. We also saw a lot of luck go in Liverpool's favour last season, a lot of offside goals given in their favour, penalties for dives, things like that, and I think with VAR it's all going to balance out and we're not going to see that luck go in their favour. So I don't think they're going to push City as much as they did last season. I think it's going to be closer between Tottenham, Liverpool and Arsenal, and City are probably going to open up a little bit more of a lead and kind of stay maybe like 6 or 7 points ahead of the pack for the majority of the season, just because of how good their team is and how they've managed to strengthen it. So 1st place is obviously Manchester City, and I've already said it's because they've strengthened what they had. Fernandinho is a very important player for City, and in the games he missed, they ended up suffering. They lost 2 games in a row in the 2 games that he first missed against Palace and Leicester, and that was when Liverpool really opened up a bit of a lead. They've brought in Rodri, who is only 24, so is going to be there for a long time. He's very good defensively, very good on the ball. He adds a lot of height to the side. He's 6'3", and that's one of the things City lacks is aerial dominance. So he's brought that in. and he's going to be there for a long time. Bernardo Silva, he was brilliant last year and got better and better as the season progressed, and he was also very good for Portugal in the Nations League. I think he's going to carry that on into next season. Gabriel Jesus, he was very good for Brazil. I think he's going to carry that on into the next season as well. The same with someone like Mahrez, he can carry that on. Sterling's had a great pre-season. City just seem to be firing. They beat Liverpool obviously in the Community Shield, which isn't a lot to read into, but they did obviously get the result there. And they've just improved all round. I think João Cancelo in at right back, he's probably going to start over Walker, I imagine. And once Mendy gets to full fitness, I think if City play Cancelo and Mendy on each side, the Premier League just isn't ready. You guys may remember, it was 2 seasons ago now, City used to play 5 at the back with Mendy and Walker, and they had them overlapping with wingers as well. And there was a month or so when they played that lineup before Mendy got injured, where they tore everyone apart. They put 5 past Liverpool, 7 past Stoke. I think they won 2 games 6-0 in a row. It was crazy. They scored literally like 30 goals in a month. And it was because they had that attacking fullback, overlapping fullback system. And I think Cancelo, as one of the best attacking right backs in world football, one of the best right backs full stop, he was so good last season. I think he's going to add a lot more going forwards that Walker doesn't have. I think on the left hand side, Angelino is going to offer so much more than someone like Delph Zinchenko going forwards. And if he doesn't play, there's Mendy, who's an upgrade on both of them, is basically like a new signing because he barely played last season. When he did play, he got like 6 assists in his first 6 or 7 games. So I think if Mendy gets fit, they're going to dominate. Those 2 fullbacks bombing forwards, Sane, who they've managed to keep hold of, Sterling, Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne, Rodri, Laporte, all round just such a good team. I think the only thing that could go wrong is if Laporte or Stones suffers a big injury, and then it's going to be like Otamendi and then sometimes Mangala and those types of players stepping in, and that could carry on when City, if they do progress in the Champions League and get further on, which I expect they will. I mean, they've got to get to like the semis at least. And I think as the season progresses, there could be injury problems potentially because they don't really have that solid strength that they had with the centre-backs last season, having Company there as well. A player they could fall back on with a lot of experience. Now it's Otamendi, who is a little bit more of a liability when he has played. He often seems to get booked and give away penalties and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep all those players fit. I think if De Bruyne stays fit too, I mean, he's basically like a new signing. Last season, City won the league without him, and when they did win the league the season before, he was their best player. So I think having him this season here, if he stays fit all season, it's going to be over. I really think City will win the title. So let me know what you think down below in the comments of these predictions. I want to say that my top scorer will be Sergio Aguero because I want him to have a season where he doesn't get injured. He's been injured every season, and in all the seasons he's been injured, he's had a much better goals per game ratio than the person who's finished as the top scorer, apart from when Salah was the top scorer 2 seasons ago. So I'd like him to have just a full season, and if that is the case, he should probably finish top scorer. Then I'm going to say Harry Kane, and then I'm going to go with Aubameyang. That's my top 3 goal scorers. And I think who's going to get promoted? Who's going to get promoted? Leeds, Fulham and Derby. I'm calling it there. That's going to be the end of the predictions. Please don't abuse me too much. It is just down to personal opinion, and it is so hard. I challenge you guys to go and pick this for yourself and think it through. Don't just randomly pick. Think for reasons of where you're ranking these teams, and it really is tricky. I'd recommend trying it out. It's good fun. And let me know down below what your predictions are. If you want to do this for yourself, there's a link down below in the description. If you guys did enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.